My dad is an example of how a person can go through so much and come out okay, come out with love on the other side, be able to have a family and to move on. And he truly is the most remarkable person I know.
The minimal anger that he has toward anybody or anything, I think that Sam always sees the goodness in people and is always willing to move forward. Even when he speaks at schools, when he meets people, they're surprised that he doesn't hold within him resentment and hostility and anger. But I never have ever seen that in Sam, ever, regardless of the circumstances.
Something to know about Sam is he was the leader behind the Illinois Holocaust Museum. He said, we need to have, right here in Chicago, a memorial and a learning center about what happened that we could never forget. And one of the things I love about Sam is he wants to make sure you know it's a learning center. This isn't just a museum about something that happened. This is a chance to educate future generations so that we will never allow this to happen again. So several things you need to know about Sam. One is he's a servant. He, through his life, is a servant to humanity. He really is. He cares for people. He loves people. He cares for kids. And it exhausts him to speak. And yet he still does it. He'll get up in front of classrooms and in front of college students, and he'll share this very painful story. And it's not that he enjoys it. Like I said, he's exhausted by the end. He does it because he wants to give everything he has to these kids. He listens to their stories, and it moves him to read their letters. That through his experience, they'll write a letter, and they'll say, if you can get through this, so can I. And they'll talk about their parents going through divorce. They'll talk about being bullied at school. They'll talk about bad medical diagnosis for them or for a loved one. And Sam's story of survival inspires them that if he could go through all that he did, well, surely I can go through mine. And that's one of the many reasons Sam will give of himself, travel all over this country to speak and to share his story. And it's really an act of service that he continues to do this.
So what you see in Sam is you see a man who has rebuilt himself in the aftermath of destruction, who didn't give death the final victory but life, who didn't give suffering the final word but healing. And that's what makes, again, this story so powerful, unique and singular to Sam, but replicated in men and women throughout this globe.
What really inspired me about Sam when I met him, and I have to say as background that I don't think I had ever had a conversation with a Holocaust survivor before I met Sam. Perhaps I'd met a few, and I had, but never a real full conversation, and a conversation that included a discussion about their own experience. But it hit me when I was finished with my very first meeting with Sam that here's somebody who's been through the worst of the worst circumstances in the world, in the history of the world perhaps, and who had lost his family, and who had been in the midst of death and destruction, and who I couldn't imagine could even believe in God after an experience like that, who nevertheless was exuding a kind of a joy, a certain exuberance about life. It's the opposite of what one would expect out of somebody who had been really almost born out of death. So I must say that it hit me that there was something really unusual about this person, that it must have been that kernel of something, some light in him while he was having the terrible experiences as a child, that little kernel of light or something within him that actually kept him alive. And that's my only explanation. It can't be that one reacts to a situation like he had and becomes this exuberant, life-loving person. It must be that someone gave that to him before he was born, in fact, or that it was something that God endowed him with. That's the only thing I can imagine, but that is what hit me about Sam the very first time I met him.
Sam changed my life. I cannot imagine being the person that I am without knowing Sam.
Well, first we went to a foster home, and Sam went to one family, and I went to another family to be adopted.
Every survivor is a miracle.
For many years, he kept his past in a box locked away inside his head, and he would never, ever talk about it.
Sam is always talking about being a victor, not being a victim. And that's a choice.
Never give up. I mean, I remember the years when he was starting in the insurance business. He just never gave up. It's a tough business. You've got to get out. You've got to meet people. You've got to do things. He just never gave up.
He is an optimist. He always has been, as long as I've known him, an optimist. He's always on the happy side of life. Considering what he's been through, it's amazing that anybody would feel that way.
I'm convinced that without Sam, we would never have this wonderful museum, just because of his simple drive and his sincerity. You know, when he said something to people, they believed him.
He's my brother-in-law, but we've been more like brothers all of these many 60 years that we've known each other.
He had a lot to give, and he's still giving.
For me, it was an honor to be able to introduce this book to the world.
Sam is and was a visionary.
He was able to survive a very tough time in his life and in our history.
His inspiration sets a tone for everything we try to achieve in this museum.
Of the many things that I've come to admire about my good friend Sam Harris is his ability to be able to see light when there was darkness.
It's pretty impressive, and then every day when you go through and you think, you know, man, things are tough, you know, you think, well, what did Sam go through? How did he go through that? It's so much worse.
If he can live his life believing that he's blessed and acting like he's blessed and appreciating that he's blessed, then so can the rest of us.
I know that there were 1.5 million Jewish children that died. I made it. I owe it to share it to the rest of the world on their behalf.